Oh, look at all of us in our little squares.
Very colorful.
I'm sort of
today.
square/hexagon over here.
Very colorful.
I like to call it your hive, Zach.
Yep.
Yeah, it's his hive. I'm in the aperitivo room. I like it.
That's the pink color's name. It's very on brand for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why we chose it. So this is not peach. Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy. It's gonna be a few weird ones with everybody traveling, but I think we're gonna get under control. You guys ready to do this?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's go. From VinePair's New York City headquarters, I'm Adam Teeter.
And in Toronto, Canada, I'm Joanna Sciarrino.
And in Seattle, Washington, I'm Zach Jabal.
And this is the VinePair podcast. Joanna, like you just leaving?
I'm just working remote for the week.
You flee north?
Who wouldn't at this point, really?
Apparently talk too much politics. Although I will say, I totally feel why you had to leave because I was up in Midtown earlier this morning. Mm-hmm. And man, the General Assembly really just ruins the whole area of like Midtown New York. Just like so many cops, so many streets were closed. Yeah, like I could see how there's no way in hell you can go in the office this week.
Yes. So for those who don't know, Evan works for the United Nations. This week is high level week. They basically tell UN employees to stay away from the UN unless they need to be there because it is such a crazy time in the city with security and everything. So we fled to Canada.
Yes.
I was
strong move.
Very nicely able to work remotely for this week. We also have a family wedding, so that's why I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what have you been reading on the site? Kick us off, Joanna.
Oh, sure. I really liked Aaron Goldfarb's piece about Cantillon and sour beers in America. And I liked it so much. And kind of like what happened to them. Like it used to be impossible to get that beer. And then it kind of sour beers in the States like reached a fever pitch and now nobody cares about them anymore. And I like this piece because I guess I like kind of inadvertently followed the same path, like the same trajectory, like was really into sours when they were first getting popular. I remember I had to source a bunch of sour beers for a piece that we did in Bon Appetit. Yeah, and I went to the Whole Foods beer store because it was so great down on Bowery. And I was in Portland. I went to Cascade Brewing. That was really cool. That place closed last year or 2 years ago. Anyway, so now I just like, as you both know, can't really drink sour beers anymore. Right. It's just like not really a style I care about. That shit is
hard, man. That shit is hard.
Yeah, but maybe I will go seek out some Cantillon because now it's like available again, right?
I haven't had Cantillon in a very long time.
Yeah, same.
I don't think I've ever had it.
Oh, really?
I don't think I ever had it.
Really?
Yeah, no. Maybe back in the day, but not that I remember. So yeah, I really like that piece. Just kind of interesting as the style kind of evolved and changed to meet demand. The kettle sour, which was much faster, right?
Yep.
I think it's just too much fruit these days for me.
It's fruit and just a little bit
it's
of like
very
high
acidic.
acid. And like it's just like I'm not trying to like rip my esophagus open.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Just not trying to do this. Well, I also don't drink natural wine. What about you, Zach?
Well, speaking of pieces about beer, I enjoyed Dave Infante's most recent hop take talking about how beer is really kind of like supposed saving grace was going to be football season, and that to date at least that is not taking place. Beer sales are continue to be down year over year, and specifically when kind of looking at like the areas, both regions and also sort of times when beer has kind of again been able to rely on football to bolster sales, just it's not happening. And, I think that a conversation that we can have in a broader sense at some point is just kind of like, it's clear that like, I mean, again, when we talk about these sort of things, sometimes I think people misunderstand us. This may come up again later in this episode where like, when we talk about categories struggling or sales declining, no one is sitting here in this podcast or really anywhere saying like, oh, beer's going away. Like there's still lots of people who like beer. There's lots of drinking occasions for beer, but as far as like declining sales and maybe losing some absolute strangleholds on occasions or sort of settings for drinking, That is absolutely happening. And again, losing sort of share around football is just one more example of that for beer. So I thought, as he always does, Dave did a really good job of kind of summing that up and, bringing some insight to it.
Yep.
Adam, you?
So my favorite piece of the last week, or one that I really enjoyed reading, was our most overrated wine region piece. So basically, the reason we do these pieces is to, let's be honest, let's talk about headlines first. So the headline obviously is very clicky. The reason you do that is because, I'm sorry, but that's how the internet works, and that's what causes people to click on things.
Do you know what traffic is like these days, people? Yeah. Come on.
People act like they don't understand. People who are like, oh, I don't understand what that headline's like, are like, click on the same thing in a different form. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay. Well, maybe yours was how to prevent yourself from not drinking too much. I don't know. So that's like most people's reaction is they click on clicky headlines. But that piece's point was talking to really well-known wine professionals, some people who've run some of the best programs in the world, to sort of talk to them about the regions they think consumers are too focused on and the regions they think consumers should focus on instead, as a way to broaden wine for consumers, right? And I really liked that piece, and those pieces always perform really well for us because consumers become educated in different regions that they might not have often been. But the reason I wanted to bring that piece up is because, yes, please.
Yes, I want to add to that because we often do these pieces of asking professionals across wine, beer, and spirits for their opinions on things. And we typically get responses from over, like a dozen people.
Yeah.
This one only had 6. And that demonstrates that there is generally a reluctance when we prompt pros, like industry pros, for overrated, that there's a reluctance to give us those answers. And I think it's for the reason that you're saying, Adam, because nobody wants to seem like they're kind of like, down on the industry or being negative about wine. But it's like you said, like it's an opportunity to kind of, broaden people's horizons in wine and show that there are other, like we do overrated, we do underrated,
and look, I think this is the example of like us as a media company, as media professionals, knowing what will cause people to want to read something.
Yeah.
In the same way as, like, again, I can make this comparison to people in wine if they can't grasp this. You might want to make a Sirtico or a natural Zinfandel, but if people don't want to drink that, then you won't sell it.
Right.
So we are writing pieces with headlines that we know will cause people to read them and then hopefully learn more than they would have. But you have to try to meet people where they are. And unfortunately, the kind of headlines that are a little bit clickier cause people to pause more to consider reading something than if they are less clicky. That's why everyone, including the New York Times, has moved to this. That is our industry. That is our profession. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, like you can take the advice of what industry best practices are in wine or beer, et cetera, and choose to make or not make something because of that. But then you succeed or fail because of those decisions. Like that's just the truth of it. So that's kind of a nice little jumping off point to our topic today, which is, so a few people have asked like why we always are like so blunt about, let's talk about wine specifically, the wine industry.
Why we're so negative.
Negative. And my immediate answer is like, we're not negative at all. I think, as we've said, the three of us, we all really love wine. But I think what we have found is a need in the sphere of wine is for some actual truth-telling, of some actual reality in the conversation around wine, because the status quo of just everybody being like, oh God, well, you want to make your passion, Jilly, do whatever you want to do. It's okay. You want to make that wine. We're going to support you. And like, we're going to give you a gold star and you're going to go home and you're going to get a trophy and everyone gets 100 points. Like, it's not working, right? Like this idea that everyone should be allowed to make wine in whatever style they want, like, and that if they're struggling, we should do everything in our power to make sure that they don't struggle, even if it's not a market fit, isn't working and hasn't worked for some time. And I will say, this is the only industry of the three where I hear this narrative, right? You don't have a lot of people in spirits being like, first of all, and spirits, what I think is very interesting is you never have people bad-mouthing their competitors in the same way that wine does. Like, sure, maybe in back rooms, like, right, the executive's like, oh man, we got to go after this bigger brand. But like when a brand wins an award, you don't have like comments being like, that brand sucks, that brand sucks. You see that a lot in wine, which I don't fully understand. And then you also, I don't think in spirits I think you have more maybe because, I don't know, it's a lot of people feel like you need more degrees to get into distilling spirits, and maybe people think you can just buy a bunch of grapes and crush them with your feet and it'll ferment and you can make wine because you like it and you have a liberal arts degree. But like, I think though you have more people who feel like everyone should be celebrated for making wine no matter what. And if they're struggling, we should all do everything in our power to
champion,
make sure they're not struggling. And like, that just doesn't, I mean, I think to some extent, yeah, we should help people with like business advice and marketing and data and saying, hey, like, have you thought about whether you could sell more if you were doing this, or if you tried this tactic to reach your consumer, if you tried that tactic, like, how well do you understand your consumer? And have you done the research to figure out like how many people in this current area are like interested in a wine made from this really weird grape that you were able to find because it was what was affordable to you? Like, did you do any of that research before you just made it? And did you think about the style and your label design? Like, that's all help we should give. But just to say like, oh, we all should just buy your wine because you made it, I think is such a bad attitude and not ultimately good for the overall wine industry. It doesn't help the overall wine industry. And I think that's why we try to have really open, honest discussions about all of the industry too, not just like the natty side or the small independent side or the big,
mass-produced side.
Like, we try to talk about all of it because it is all one industry that is fueling ultimately whether or not people will continue to drink wine, right?
Right. And I think there's something that needs to be pointed out here, which is there's sort of two layers to this, at least in my mind. One of them is a sort of question about to what extent do the three of us, or does VinePair as a publication, or anyone who covers the wine industry professionally, have some obligation to kind of be, however you would define it, kind of like pro-wine, right? Like, obviously, as you mentioned, Adam, like all three of us enjoy drinking wine. I would like, honestly—
I'm pro-wine.
Yeah, I would love for the wine industry to be doing much better. It would be more fun to do this job in some ways. Some people love the negativity. I don't necessarily like talking about how wine is doing poorly in a lot of areas, or beer or spirits or whatever, but that is the reality, and it's our job, as I see it, to be honest with you all. And if we can't do that, then we're not doing our job. And the second piece of it is like, beyond that, whether or not we're sort of supposed to be advocates for wine in a more general sense, which I don't think we necessarily are obligated to, but it's certainly true that I think, we would generally like to see the industry healthy at a minimum.
Yeah.
More to the point, I definitely don't think it's our responsibility or obligation to champion any and all wineries, wine brands, regions, etc. Like, we each have our favorites. We talk about them on the podcast. We have our, whether that's varieties, places, individual producers. You'll hear it from us. If you're a listener of any length, probably to some extent, maybe more than you care to know, about what the three of us like to drink. But fundamentally, my preferences as a drinker are not necessarily the same as how I feel as a journalist covering this industry, because It's my job, our job, to be honest with you all and to be truthful with you all and to say where we think brands, whether we like the product they're making or not, are doing a good job and where they are doing a bad job. And again, like, that is sort of the deal here. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget. I mean, look, I'm a big sports fan, and sometimes, a thing that drives me a little bit nuts is when other fans get critical of, say, the beat writer that covers a local team, and they complain that like the beat writer is being too hard on the team. And it's like, that is their job. Like, whether or not they would like the team to win, often beat writers would like to cover a good team. They probably want the team to go to the playoffs. It's more fun. But their job is not to just be a cheerleader. Like, for one, often the teams employ literal cheerleaders. But second of all, even if they don't, like, that's what fans are for. There are also these days in the sort of media ecosystem, there are all kinds of other things out there, influencers, blogs, whatever, whether we're talking about sports, wine, whatever, that are coming at it with much more of a raw point of view. And that's fine. I like some of that content. I'm sure that lots of you all do. But fundamentally, our job is not cheerleading. Like, that is not why we are here. I don't own pom-poms. And so our job is to be honest and critical where necessary, to say when we think things are going poorly and when we think things are going well. And it's just a case of the fact of the matter is, over the last few years, it has not been going well for wine. And we would be Pollyanna-ish if we came on this podcast every week and we're like, wine's killing it, y'all. Like, it's just, no one thinks that. No one in the industry thinks that. The three of us hear all the time from people within the industry who tell us, on the record or off, how concerned they are about the direction of the industry, how they don't necessarily know what the future holds, how they're concerned about the industry as a whole and maybe their individual winery or brand, what it looks like moving forward. And if we didn't bring that to you all, those of you who are less in those conversations day to day, again, we would be derelict in our duty.
Yeah.
I agree.
I 100% agree with everything you just said, Zach. Obviously, like from a journalistic point of view, I just don't think there's no value in not having the hard conversations about what's happening in the industry right now. Like, and I think that being honest about that, like, we champion wine. I think it's like fair to say that we do. Like, we care about wine, we care about the success of the industry and the category and everything. So I think this is all like, when we have these conversations where we're more critical of what's happening, I think that it has to be understood that it's coming from a place of like ultimately advocating for the success of the category, right? And not rooting for its demise. And I agree, as Zach said, we've also had conversations about wine's successes and things that are going well and smart moves and, you know, how companies are strategizing and why we think that strategy is smart. Like, we talked about Whiny Baby, whatever, last week, and that acquisition. And yeah, Dave Infante recently got similar feedback about his beer coverage in his Hop Take column. Like, can you talk about something positive? Can you cover more happy things, Dave? Like, is that the reality of the situation right now? Unfortunately, it's not. And it's our job to kind of cover and discuss good and bad. And for as much criticism we might get about being negative about wine on this podcast, like, we get lots of emails from people thanking us for having these conversations, people from within the industry saying that these are like, this is what they're experiencing themselves. So I feel like it is our job to bring that to our audience and have these harder conversations that like people don't really want to have. There's so much denial, I feel, with this stuff. And it's not it's ultimately like not very helpful or useful for the industry.
If you want to listen to like we've been very clear, like VinePair is a publication, right? Is a consumer and trade publication, but much more consumer focused, who's trying to get people excited about experiencing culture through the lens of drinks. However that happens, right? You're excited about drinks, excited about culture. It's a lifestyle publication. This podcast, we've been very clear, is a business publication. I mean, a business podcast, right? We talk a lot about the business of alcohol. That's what this podcast is in the whole network of the podcasts, right? This is a very frank discussion. If you can't handle it, you can't handle it. But like, I think
it's a very positive wine podcast.
What?
Wine 101.
Wine 101. Exactly. Listen to Wine 101. Like, go listen to Wine 101. I mean, a good example of this, I think, is based on a podcast we did a few weeks ago, where I talked about how The Prisoner's not good. But besides that, someone emailed me, a listener, and was like, hey, I know that you are saying that like this is a wine that's not good, but like consumers really like it. So like, what's your beef? And my beef isn't with The Prisoner per se. My beef is with The Prisoner trying to act like it is the same or wanting to be treated in the same way that, let's say, I don't know, DRC, Chateau Mouton, Rothschild, et cetera, are treated. And to me, they are very different products, both in wine. The Prisoner is a product that has found an incredible amount of consumers that love it. That's great. There are people that like that flavor profile. That's great. It's not wine in my definition of wine. And it's not wine in a lot of trades' definition of wine. That's okay. In terms of fine wine, I'm not saying it's not wine and that it's not made in the way that wine is made. It's made in the way that wine is made. What I'm saying is, to me, I don't see why they even waste their time paying for scores, because at the end of the day, they are beloved by a huge group of consumers. So it always blows my mind when we'll get, the partnerships team here will get briefs from some bigger brands like The Prisoner, that will say things like, we want to do a trade focused dinner to, make sure the trade still take us seriously. And I'm like, girl, the trade doesn't have to take you seriously. Consumers are asking for it and want to buy it. Like, you need to act. And so for me, it's like those brands need to act more like the way that some of these big spirits brands that know they're beloved by consumers act, where like all they ever do is thank trade so much for continuing to pour them. They're not trying to get trade to have their eyes opened, and trade are going to have the biases they're going to have. Like, I remember hearing about a big brand that wanted to do like blind tastings of trade. Like, ha ha ha, see, we told you we were really good. Like, why? Why are you trying to do that? Just go and do really fun stuff that thanks trade for continuing to pour you, because it helps their bottom line. If they have The Prisoner on their list, especially if they are at certain kinds of restaurants, steakhouses, sort of like more American fancy fare across the country, and most people who see that, who like that wine, are going to order that and pay the bottom market price because they like The Prisoner, right? So behave more like a Jack Daniels or a Tito's, et cetera. Do fun concerts for trade. Take trade on crazy trips. Support them by helping them live out their dreams in the world of wine. Support their wine educations. Do really cool shit for trade, and they will be thankful for the brand. You don't have to convince the trade that they should think of you in the same breath in their own wine tastes as they think of other wines they love. And I think that that's I guess I'm taking this full circle back to Zach's point. Like, we love wine, right? But like, the wines that I love, I don't let influence all the ways we talk about wine, right? And all the ways we cover wine. There's both an honesty aspect to covering wine and being realistic about what actually should work for brands and what shouldn't. And then the way that I would like to experience the wine brands that I don't know, collect or drink on a regular basis, et cetera. Those are two different things. And I feel like where, again, Spirits gets it right is they recognize that they all don't have to behave the same way. Like, Jack Daniels is not bringing trade into a fancy restaurant and doing a focused whiskey tasting with the trade. Okay, so maybe for their single barrel products they actually are, but that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
They're throwing concerts at Tales with Run the Jewels, right? And like thanking trade for pouring them. I just don't see why some of these brands like The Prisoner are so obsessed with trying to be taken seriously. Consumers like you, man. You don't need to be taken seriously by trade.
Yeah. I want to make a point that occurred to me a little bit ago in terms of, coming back to the question about specifically like the 6 overrated wine regions and that content as kind of juxtaposed with lots of the other coverage on the site. And, you sort of made this analogy, Adam, but I'm just going to take it a little bit further, which is like,
please.
To me, there's this sort of reality of, in the same way that if I were, or we were, if VinePair were a wine company, we would probably, if we were prudent, we would probably focus a fair bit of our, kind of time, energy, investment, et cetera, on wines that we have a strong idea of how they'll perform in the market, right? Like they will sell, because wine still sells. It's not like no one's buying wine. It's just, again, struggling compared to the past. And that gives you, hopefully, some leeway and latitude to do other interesting stuff. Because, like, to come back to what we all talked about as the things we were reading, Joanna knows the numbers probably better than I do, so does Adam. But I would bet that, that wine piece about, the 6 overrated wine regions got a lot more clicks than either Aaron's Cantillon piece or Dave's Hop Take. Because fundamentally, I think about this all the time. The stuff I write for the site, we have an internal Slack channel that's like basically just what's trending that we've written, and my stuff never shows up there, and that's fine. Like the stuff I write is niche-ish. It's a lot similar to the content on the podcast. I love doing it. Hopefully, the people who read it enjoy it, but I know it's not aimed at the largest audience that VinePair serves, and that's the reality of any publication, right? Big or small these days, you are probably speaking to the constellation of readers or listeners or followers or whatever, however you want to talk about your audience, is a mix of people who are going to only consume some of the sort of trendiest, most clicky whatever content that you produce, and then some smaller subset of that is going to be in it for the more detailed, nuanced, hard reported stuff that we publish. And again, I think this is where if want to talk for a moment about sort of a lack of media literacy in the country in general. I think people don't understand about journalism is publications contain multitudes, right? And you can look at any publication of any scale. We talk about the New York Times on this podcast from time to time, and the Times has a bunch of different shit that it produces. I mean, it has a whole sports, I don't know, it's not even a vertical. It's like a whole apparatus through The Athletic now. It has obviously like its games. It has, you know, the cooking stuff. And it also has like hard news coverage, style, all the stuff that it does. And it would be sort of weird to me for someone to look at like a style piece and be like, wow, this isn't like the most rigorous form of journalism I've ever seen. How dare the New York Times run a trends piece or something?
Yeah.
Like that the publication does all kinds of stuff. And obviously VinePair is not the size or scope of the New York Times, but within the thing that you described that, I mean, this idea of looking at, you know, the culture through the lens of culture through the lens of drinking and drinks, that entails both a sort of breezier piece that also hopes to like kind of explore some underappreciated regions through the idea of being like, you're familiar with these regions, maybe it's time to give something else a look, with all the other stuff that's published that is much more, you know, I don't want to say hard hitting, but like that is much more focused on like, let's do something that's really hoping to uncover something. And again, for our listeners who are probably most of you not super familiar with how journalism works, especially in 2025, this is what every publication does. And, you know, again, if you think that the only way a publication can be doing journalism is through like, you know, kind of straight news reportage, like, I don't really know what world you think you're living in.
I mean, I think another really good example of this is it's just this idea. And again, I don't know if this is only this exists, I know, in every single area, but it became very apparent to me when we announced our Next Wave winners, where it's like, yeah, I want the industry to have good press. Oh, but I don't want those people to have good press. Right. So it's like we announced some of the finalists, and there were some comments by other winemakers. And again, these comments were not made by people in the spirits of the beer industry. The only negative comments about any of the wine nominees, the only negative comments came about people in wine categories, by other wine people, by people who own natty wine bars in places like North Carolina, and other winemakers, which I find so crazy. Like, you want all this press, but then, and again, I think this is part of why we talk honestly about what's wrong with wine. Like, you want to stream out people being positive, but then you're not positive yourself.
Right.
So, like, the crazy contradictions that are there, you know, you want to scream about everyone needing to support wine, but then when there are bigger companies that are helping drive the industry forward, you're like, well, not those companies, fuck those companies. I mean, it's honestly quite gross and pathetic, and it speaks to the larger issues I think that wine continues to have, where they, you know, you can stay doing your own thing and just don't even comment on it.
Right.
Just keep your head down and then do your own thing, and like find your own audience and figure it out. Like, you don't have to reach out to people who've been recognized for an accolade and tell them they don't deserve it.
Right. But I think so much of this is
it's crazy.
So much of this is like the fear and that these people feel, because I think even whether they want to admit it or not, whether they come at us for being critical about wine or whatever, like, I think anyone can be looking at what's going on, whether it's within their individual winery or company or the broader industry, and be like, legitimately, and I have a lot of sympathy for people, like, am I going to be able to keep doing this? Like, is this business going to succeed? Totally. Is it going to, you know, last? And that's a fucking scary place to be. I have a lot of sympathy for people looking at their bottom line and just saying like, I don't know. And fear makes people do ugly, fucked up things, including sometimes just like take shots at people who don't deserve to have them taken, you know, peers and things like that. And again, I don't think it's exclusive to wine, but I do think that wine is the area that, you know, since we're talking about it, that has more of this tendency in the first place, I think. Oh, yeah. And because it's under stress and strain right now, it's more acute and we see it more out in the open, because I think there's like a little bit of a like, well, I got to get mine while I can attitude, or at least that's the sort of undercurrent that I feel a lot in this, that, you know, if wine were just absolutely doing great, I think a lot of this sort of sentiment would be, you know, on the back burner more, because people would be just too busy, I don't know, like, you know, selling wine,
crushing it,
to worry about like if someone else is also crushing it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I don't know. I feel like there does, like, the positivity does exist, but the positivity exists in a place where we are also open and honest about what gets us to that positivity, right? And not everything it can't just always be because we all love wine, this thing must succeed. It has to be also because we love wine and we're doing the right things on the business side, on the marketing side, on the production side, in the relationship with our consumers, in order to ensure that people continue to love wine as much as previous generations have. Like and if you can't have the open conversations as to why that may not be the case. I mean, I keep thinking about like, man, if I were really into wine, starting to get into wine, and I kind of like saw the behavior of some of the people that I see online and like the comments that are made, or we talk about this a bunch. Like I was made to feel bad about a wine choice or whatever. Like I would turn to cocktails too.
Right.
I think this is such a big part. You've both said it, but it's such a big part of this conversation, which is that, you can't just be, this idea of like wanting everyone to be positive about wine, but then being, like shitting on other brands. Like you can't have it both ways. And I think that it takes like credibility away from when you say things like wine needs to be positive to like uplift the whole category, and then you're shitting on other brands. And it's like, it just kind of totally nullifies you and what you're, like that your contributions.
People should not buy from, certain, people shouldn't buy these producers. As long as people are drinking wine, man, that's great. And as long as we're exposing people to new wine, that's great. Like, I think, it can't just be, people should be positive as long as it benefits me.
Right. Exactly.
And that's
or about
kind of
the brands that I think are good, or about the people and the producers who I think are good and we should be championing, but not everybody.
And that's the problem. Like, I don't know. I think about this a lot in terms of the way a lot of different vodka companies have talked to me about Tito's. Do I think that every single vodka company is extremely jealous of Tito's? 1,000%.
And they should
Do I think they all also recognize, and I've been told this by like multiple people now, that they all were asleep at the wheel. They were all premiumizing, and Tito's saw an opening and was like, we can go in lower but be craft, but not premium. We're not going to chase Grey Goose and Belvedere and Kettle, and we're going to take the market. And they were right. They were paying attention when no one else was. They are now the largest vodka company in the country by far. But no one's like, screw that brand. Everyone's like, mad respect, but we're coming for it. Like, we're going to try to figure it out. We're going to try to innovate, and we're not going to fall asleep at the wheel again. And like, that's a really great attitude to have, right? Of like, yep, we totally got bested here. That sucks. But like, also props to them. And we get why people like the product, and we're going to try to keep innovating until we catch the product. And you know what? May not be in the next year, may not be in the next 5 years. They may be in the next decade. But at some point, one of us will have an opportunity to become the leading vodka ahead of them, because that's how markets work, right? And that's how brands work. But no one's just sitting there being like, screw people that drink Tito's. And because at the end of the day, people drinking Tito's means people are drinking vodka, which means that you get to keep trying to make vodka for people to drink as well. That's how it works.
Right. I want to make one last point here, which occurred to me when you were making that sort of point, Adam. I think one other thing that's important to note here about that I think sets wine apart in a specific way is I do get a sense from a lot of the people in wine that I talk to and have talked to over the number of years that, knowingly or not, wine people and the industry as a whole tends to have a bit of a like, there's a bit of a vibe of like late stage monarchy to the wine industry, where people kind of like, there's this legacy, this tradition, this history that the people in the wine industry now have just inherited, right?
Yeah.
We didn't, no one here was out there in the classification of 1855 or, the monks, mapping the Grand Crus of Burgundy or whatever. And a lot of wine's prestige, place at the table, et cetera, is something that people in the wine industry now have just literally inherited. And the thing about monarchies is like sometimes they get deposed. And while I don't want that to happen, again, big fan of wine, we would like the wine industry to continue to be strong. When your only sort of like tactic is to like be like, well, we've always been the thing that people look to have with their meals or to convey, prestige and luxury. Like, okay, that's true until it's not. And I think a lot of what we're seeing with wine right now is just people being unable to grapple with the fact that the historic preeminence of wine is not a necessary or obvious insurance that it will be that way in the future, or in the present or future. And so, again, I think this is a thing where, our listeners who struggle with this kind of, I guess you could call it negativity. Again, I would call it kind of honesty, to think really and truly about yourself and say, like, okay, I may love wine. I may be very passionate about wine. I may believe that the wine industry is, whatever it is. And you may be annoyed that we aren't quite the same degree of cheerleaders. But I think you also have to be like, look at any data you see, like whatever you want to attribute it to. Wine sales are down, and wine sales are down kind of across the board. And that is a thing that, like, our job as journalists is to explain that. Our job is to take something that's happening and say, like, why is it happening? Our job is not to take something that's happening and say, like, man, it'd be great if that wasn't happening. Like, that's not journalism. That's not even close to journalism. So again, that is why we do this. Like, this is what we're here to do. And again, as was said, like, there's other content out there if you just want people being like, wine's great. And we say that sometimes too, but we're not going to only ever just say that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, let us know what you think. Hit us up at podcast@VinePair.com. Also, like, you can always email us. We'll write you back.
Or make a reel about it.
Or
We'll find it. We'll watch it.
Do whatever you want. I'll chat with you both on Monday.
Have a nice weekend.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much for listening to the VinePair podcast, the flagship podcast of the VinePair Podcast Network. If you love this podcast, please leave us a rating or review wherever it is that you are currently listening to it on. It really helps other people discover the show. Also, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your colleagues. Basically, tell anyone about the VinePair podcast. It's always very appreciated, especially by Joanna. The podcast is hosted by myself, Adam Teeter, our editor-in-chief, Joanna Sciarrino, and Zach Jabal, former sommelier from Seattle, Washington. As we all know, it is edited by Darby Seasai. Theme music also by Darby Seasai. Art for the podcast by Daniel Grinberg. VinePair was co-founded by myself and Josh Mallon. Thanks so much again for listening, and we will see you again the next time you listen to an episode. If you made it all the way through these credits, I again consider you a super fan.